What's up, Desktopers? Xavier Wills here for Desktop Bodybuilding, and we are back with another video. And today I'm interviewing Fouad Abiad, IFBB Pro Bodybuilder, also owner of Hostile Supplements and Apparel. And we go into a range of topics in part one of this two-part interview. We discuss obviously the passing of his good friend and Bodybuilding and Bollocks co-host, Luke Sandoe. And we also talk about adversity inside and outside bodybuilding, and do you still have to pay your dues in IFBB Pro Bodybuilding, plus much, much more. So make sure, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and smash that like button. Also subscribe and hit the notification bell button. That way you'll be notified of every video that goes up for myself, Xavier Wills at Desktop Bodybuilding, including part two of this interview. So make sure you do subscribe. Anyway, guys, if you guys want to support obviously myself and Fouad with Hostile Supplements, check out his products at hostile with 2s's.com and you use the code XAV10, XAV10, and you'll save yourself 10% off Hostile Supplements. Anyway, guys, on with the video, and I hope you enjoy part one of my two-part interview with Fouad Abiad. Welcome back to Desktop Bodybuilding. Today I am joined by Fouad Abiad. He's the owner of Hostile Supplements and Apparel. He's a two-time pro contest winner, and he has a whole lot of stuff that he's done in the bodybuilding industry. Fouad, welcome to Desktop Bodybuilding. How's
it going, Xavier? Good to be on with you, man.
I'm very well, and obviously thank you very much for coming on as a sponsor of obviously myself and also Desktop Bodybuilding. And it was cool when you actually reached out to me because, you know, Luke Sandoe, who's, you know, tragically passed away very recently, I said to Luke, because I interviewed him one day and the next day I hadn't even put anything up about it. And the next day you contacted me and said, hey, I'd like to talk about, you know, working together. And I sent Luke a message. I said, did you put in a good word with me with Fouad? And he goes, oh, what, do you want to interview him? I said, well, no, he just contacted me. And he goes, oh. And I said, man, you could have played along and got a cut of it. And he said, I can still take a cut. I don't mind. So, which is really cool. And then you obviously came to me, I checked out your products and I was insanely impressed. And we'll get more into that later and we'll talk about the brand and what you're actually doing with that too, because it's really, really cool. And I'm like insanely impressed with what you've done with it. But let's talk a little bit about your history and what's going on. I suppose how you got into the sport, how long you've been competing and how many contests and everything you've done. Because I've looked back on muscle memory and 2003 was the first time I saw you in terms of competitions that they've actually lodged and logged onto this website. So that's 17 years from there. And as a pro, you've been competing for about 14 years now. So that's huge. So how did you get into it? What motivated you to start bodybuilding?
It was actually a dare at a competition. I originally didn't think bodybuilding was cool at all. I used to read Men's Health for those of you who don't know. I don't know if you guys know what Men's Health is, but it's like a kind of like a beach body, you know, just get healthy kind of magazine. And I used to see, I remember the very first cover of Flex I saw had Dorian Yates on the cover, and it was like, this is ridiculous. Like nobody should look like this. That's kind of my first impression of bodybuilding. I think I was 18 at the time or something like that. And I was coming off of being chubby when I was 17, and I was just doing like cardio and lots of that kind of shit. Anyway, fast forward, I started bouncing at a club, and one of the head bouncers there was like 260 pounds, like 5'9", 5'10", still a friend to this day. And I remember him just walking through the crowd and people would just move out of his fucking way. Like they would just, and if they didn't move, he would just kind of throw them aside. And, I just thought it's pretty fucking cool to be that fucking jacked, right? It was the first time I'd seen it in real life, but it still didn't do anything for me. I just thought it was cool. I started lifting weights a little bit, but nothing crazy. And I got invited to go watch him compete at the Toronto Pro-Am in 2000, May 2000. And at that show, the Pro-Am, it had Dexter Jackson was there and Marcus Rule was there. So those are the first two pros I remember seeing. I met Mike Matarazzo at that show, and I was blown away by how they looked. And so we're sitting in the audience, and I say to a friend, I could fucking do this shit if I wanted to. And he goes, no, you can't. He goes, do it then. He goes, do the Windsor show. Windsor is like where I live. It's a local show. He goes, do the Windsor show then. So I said, okay, fine. So we had a bet going, and I waited 14 months until the 2001 Windsor Cup, which was our local show, and I won the overall there. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm kind of good at this. So, but I guess I had already fallen in love with training, because even when I was doing like the circuit training stuff, I really enjoyed. I have a little bit of a social anxiety to me, and I always have had it. And then when I started doing gear, it got a lot worse. Anybody who's had anxiety and then started using gear will know that your anxiety is almost amplified. So I always had a little bit of anxiety even in high school and stuff. And when I started training and doing cardio and just kind of doing circuit stuff, it got me into the gym by myself for like an hour a day. And I enjoyed being alone. It was the introvert in me. I was like, this is pretty sweet. So then when you tie that to actually getting the competing and winning, I was like, I think I kind of want to do this, right? But I still thought I was shit. I'm like, whatever. I won like a local show, big deal. And I went on to the next show, which was like a regional, and I won that too. And I was like, okay. I started to get kind of a big head. I'm like, okay, maybe I want to do this for a living. Like maybe I need to. It's weird. It's like some people want to be pro bodybuilders. I just wanted to get paid so I could keep working out. Like I didn't want to go to a job. I wanted to figure out some way to be able to get paid and just go to the gym. And I'm like, I got to be a pro bodybuilder. That's the way to do it. So that was my goal from that point on. I was like, I need to find a way to stay in my happy place. And my happy place was always the fucking gym. It was the place where nobody could bother me. My anxiety was gone. It was my home. So that's kind of how everything started to roll from there.
Yeah, and in 2007, 2008, that's when you really burst on the scene. And I've actually even told you this, I don't know if it was in text or on the phone. And I said, me and a mate were actually talking about you. And I discussed with him the other day, because he said, congrats on the sponsorship. And he talked about you, and he said, he's talking about Fouad, and he's saying, you have the mohawk. It's like, damn, he's so cool. Like, he just sort of burst onto the scene. And I was like, at the time, I was like, where did this dude come from? Because you would see the American guys, you'd see them at the NPC Nationals, you'd see them in magazines, they turned pro, and you'd sort of expect them, you know what I mean? You expect them coming. Yeah. But it seemed like you just came out of nowhere. And I'm like, this dude's placing top 5 in shows already. This is really, really cool. So when you actually came onto the scene, you started placing really well. I remember you mentioning in another podcast, you saying that, I don't know if you said exactly how you said it, but your ego, or you thought like you were the shit sort of thing. How much have you changed since then? Because you're very self-aware of how you were at the time compared to how you are now, which is cool to actually hear.
The guy, I'm actually ashamed of that guy. Now, I probably make it sound a lot worse than it is. Like, but to me, I feel like I've changed. I don't recognize that person anymore. And it's not that all of a sudden I'm like this really sweet person. Like, I'm still a dick, but I think I had, to be completely honest with you, it's an insecurity masked by a cockiness. So, but it's also an anxiety which kept me very quiet. So when people saw me, they didn't know if I was quiet because I was a dick, and they just thought, well, that guy's a snobby person, or that guy's an asshole, or whatever. So some of the times it turned out that people were making judgments on me just because I was a quiet person. But when I look at myself, it's not necessarily that I've changed a whole lot as a person. It's more that my behaviors have changed.
Yeah.
I've learned to measure my expectations. I've learned to respect. More so, the most important thing is I've learned to respect people, and I've learned to enjoy interacting with them and feel value in corresponding with them and helping them. Whereas before I was like, I don't know. I'm embarrassed to say it, but I guess I was kind of like, I don't need to respond to emails. I don't need to respond to messages. I don't need to do this. I just want to get on stage. It's not my job to be a role model. It's not my job to be an ambassador. It's not my job to give a shit. I just want to compete. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
And there's something very something very precision about that, where like all I want to do is compete. I don't care about anything else. But when you don't value all these other things, I feel like you're losing a lot in life, and you're not really grasping what value you really have and what value people bring to you. So it's just it took a lot of growing. I just had to grow up. And as you grow up, if you have an insecurity when you're younger, as long as you work on yourself, you can grow out of that insecurity. And I think that's kind of what happened to me as I grew. One of the things about bodybuilding I love, and I've talked about this before, is when you deal with a lot of adversity, and it doesn't mean injuries necessarily. I mean, even adversity, like one of my first shows, I thought I should have placed at. I'm like, I should have been top 3. I was like 7th. They put me in 7th.
Yeah.
And it's debatable. I mean, some people had me in 5th, some people had me in 3rd. Regardless, I went outside and I cried my eyes out in a parking lot about it. And to me, that was an adversity of getting my ass kicked. I was like, oh shit, I'm not as good as I think I am. And I think when you start dealing with more and more and more adversity and injuries and deaths in the family, and you start to grow as a person and you start to kind of realize your place in the world. And as you grow out of your insecurity, you can start to appreciate all these other things you never did before because you were so caught up in yourself that you never cared about all this other shit.
Yeah.
So you start to become less, what's the word I'm looking for? Less self-centered.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So there's a lot of, I mean, I guess I just went through like a mishmash of things, but there's a lot of growth that happened from 25 to 35.
Yeah, and what you mentioned about, when you go through certain things in life, certain adversities, and I actually say to people, I'm lucky I experienced, people that are close to me that have died, at quite young ages when I was a lot younger, and that sort of, I feel like that built me, and it sort of made me it grounded me a little bit more, and I feel like if those things hadn't happened to me, then maybe I wouldn't have grown actually as a person as well. So I'm almost thankful for those things. Not in a way you don't want people to die, but I'm sort of thankful that I've actually been able to grow from that and become a better person, I feel like, in the long term. But let's discuss, as you said, you came 7th in that show, you were upset about it. And I actually remember back then seeing you and thinking, like, why isn't this dude placing higher in a few shows? And I thought, your physique deserved it. And back then it really seemed like you had to earn your dues. You had to pay your dues and work your way up. Do you feel like it's as much like that these days, or do you think that's sort of like phased out a little bit?
I feel like the judging's more fair nowadays, if that makes sense. And I don't mean to say it's more fair as in they weren't fair back then, but there was an air about the sport where you did have to pay your dues, and they weren't going to place you ahead of somebody who's been around for 10 years if you just showed up, because that's just the way it was. You had to kind of slog through the shit and prove your stripes and show them that you're going to stick around, and you weren't just there for a year. And I think nowadays, I don't think it's like that. Now I think there's some of that, but it's very, very little. I think now the shows are more fair in a sense that if you show up and you're the best, you're probably going to get placed where you should place. I don't usually look at shows anymore and see guys getting, 4th when they deserve 2nd or 6th when they deserve 3rd. Everybody kind of seems to be fitting where they belong. So I feel like, maybe there's a couple things, like I could point to like Patrick Moore at the Olympia. People thought Patrick could have been a little bit higher. Yeah. I'm not saying he would have been like 3rd or something, but he could have been a couple places higher. There's stuff like that maybe, but I think overall that pay your dues mentality is a little bit, we're kind of past that point now.
Yeah, and I think judges are human as well, because when you're so used to seeing the same guys over and over, and then someone else just jumps in, you go, oh, where do we place this guy? And if there's an excuse to not place him higher, like Patrick Moore, you might say, oh, he's a little bit smaller than these other dudes, so you can sort of push him a little bit lower. But over your career, you seem to come in condition pretty much every time you've stepped on stage or very close to it. Is that something that's always been a real focus for you? Because I know Evan Centopani is much the same way, and he almost reminds me of you a little bit, always comes in condition. Evan is almost a little bit too fast. Sometimes he flattens out a little bit, almost like a Dorian Yates even sometimes used to as well. Is that always been a focus for you, just coming in as hard as possible?
Yeah, my thing is fear, right? Like I'm terrified of looking like shit. I'm terrified of, actually, to go even deeper, I'm terrified of embarrassing myself. And that's part of, maybe it's part of being, not doing my family, making sure my family name is upheld and I'm not embarrassing the people around me and embarrassing my family name. And it's partially just not embarrassing myself. I don't want to, I was always a soldier about shit, and I know this is a common thing now. So I'm not saying it's like I'm special, but if I was supposed to eat a cup of rice, it was a cup of rice. It was never a cup and a quarter. I was just very, very meticulous about this shit. Plus, some people say like, oh, you don't have to suffer to look great. I kind of thrived in that. Like if I didn't feel like shit, I felt like I was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Which may be why maybe I pushed it too far. Because there's times where I pushed it too far and I hurt myself, or I pushed it too far and there's a few times I didn't come in shape. It could have been because I was trying to go too far. And for me, it was like a trigger. If I got to the 4-week mark or the 3-week mark and I still felt great, something was off. So I would push myself to that point. I would push myself to the point where I was on the step mill and I was hypo and I was just, that chilly, dripping sweat. Like I got to eat something or I'm going to pass out. I would look for that feeling as a marker. Yeah, that would be, if I didn't get there at some point in the prep, I'd be like, I didn't push myself hard enough. So, but it was all, I think, based around fear, because I'm like, I can't put these trunks on and have people laugh at me. So that was like, fear can be a very powerful tool if you can harness it. And there was times where I couldn't harness it and it actually fucked up my prep. Like, for example, like there was some self-sabotage that took place getting ready for the Arnolds. The Arnolds always fucked me up. I did the Arnolds 4 times or 3 times. I can't remember if I did it 3 or 4 times. 4 times. Every single time I went to the Arnolds, I wasn't in shape, because I'm not like I was way off, but it would always fuck me up. The fear paralyzed me because it was such a big show.
Yeah.
And then at the smaller shows, I was able to harness that fear because it wasn't overwhelming, and I was able to come in at my best. So that's one of the regrets I have in bodybuilding. I actually spoke to a very popular bodybuilder. I won't mention his name, but it was after a podcast we did. And, I heard him talking during the podcast. It sounded very familiar to me. So after we wrapped up, I said to him, look, I just want to say something to you. I don't want you to take offense to it, but you need to learn to have better perspective, because if you're stuck in your own head the way you sound you're going to miss your whole career. Your whole career is going to go by, and you're not going to feel it because you're too wrapped up in your own thoughts. And that's kind of what happened to me. I wasn't able to manage my fear, and I wasn't able to enjoy my successes because I was always, the fear sometimes overtook like what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And it seems like a fine balance, because you hear about a lot of the greats in sports and even just like, people that are successful in life in general. They have this sort of like, okay, they don't celebrate their I suppose, successes as much, but it also can actually lead to them, having mental health issues and things like that as well. Like you see Robin Williams, one of the most successful people in acting, ends up taking his own life. And sadly, we see what happened with Luke Sandoe, who was obviously a great friend of yours, and you recorded the Bodybuilding Bollocks podcast with him, and he was much loved by so many people. And I'm fortunate enough that I got to interview Luke, only 3 to 4 weeks before it happened. And most people are just in utter shock of what happened with Luke, and no one really saw it coming, apart from the people that are very close to him. Now, how did that affect you? Because, were you as shocked as everyone else, or how did you digest the whole situation?
I was definitely shocked. I think, if you want the honest truth, I think Ben and maybe Carly. Carly is his ex-girlfriend, and then Ben is, I think, his best friend, are probably the only two that, I don't want to say saw this coming, but the only two that maybe knew he had these types of feelings. He had mentioned some things to me that, they probably drew some flags here and there, but like, I think everybody has certain thoughts, like maybe not everybody. A lot of people do. A lot of people have thoughts where they're down or they're depressed, or they're like, I didn't have a good childhood or whatever. And I don't know, it's not cause for alarm, right? So sometimes you don't, I do have to say I was shocked, because we talked about some things, but never enough. He didn't confide in me enough yet. We were getting there. Like, we didn't see each other every day. We talked on the phone sometimes, and we talked openly on the podcast for, hours at a time, but it was getting to the point where he was starting to open up about stuff, but never enough for me to know the severity of it.
Yeah.
So it did shock me. I remember I woke up in the morning and I was checking my DMs, right? First thing I do, I just go on whatever, email or Instagram. I was checking DMs and somebody said, "Is this true?" And it was a screenshot from some website that had announced it. And I was like, get the fuck out of here, right? I was like, whatever, it's fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, I'm like, wait a minute. Let me just make sure. So I messaged Luke, messaged him again, call him. Nothing. And I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to get worried. And then the phone rings and it's James. And I'm like, as soon as the phone rang and it was James, I fucking knew something was wrong because James doesn't call me, right?
Yeah.
We text sometimes, we DM, but he called me. I was like, okay, what the fuck? So I sat down and James told me, and I literally, like, I fucking fell apart. Right there, like I couldn't. And then I got off the phone with James, and then Ben called me right after that, and then I fucking broke down again. And the first couple of days were just a horrible, like, I don't know. Even now, it basically goes like, there's 3 or 4 emotions that I go through right now. And sometimes they're all in the same day, and sometimes they're on separate days. Sometimes they're all in the same hour. There's always the laughter because, I have like 60 hours of me and Luke shooting the shit. So I can go back. This is the most beautiful thing about it is I can go back and fucking talk to Luke anytime I want. I just put the podcast on and we're here. And the great thing is I feel like everybody can do that also because they're all on my channel. Anytime anybody misses Luke, they can go on and fucking watch a podcast and they can fucking hear him and feel him. And we never edited shit, so it's really who he is. So there's laughter, right? And then there's anger. And this one I think people will probably not like me for, but I don't give a shit. There's anger. And part of me is angry at him. Most likely because I don't understand it. Maybe because he didn't talk to me about it. Not that I could have done anything. I don't want to say that, but still I'm angry. And I'm angry he's just not here. And that's just real. So whoever doesn't like that I said that, I'm sorry, but that's just fucking real. And then there's just there's days where I'm just distracted. Like it's like he's always like right here. Like I can hear him, see him. It's always like right here. But I'm not. I'm still posting about my company and I'm still training and shit. But he's right here. Like he's just this distraction. It's a good distraction, but it's also like, I don't know. It's hard to explain all the different emotions, but I'll say this. Luckily, Luke had really good friends like Carly and Donna and James and Ben especially, that I've been able to lean on. And it's nice to be able to talk to people that are really close to him because they kind of give you, like I messaged Ben like probably 4 or 5 days after it happened. And I was like, I don't know what to do, man. Do I do a podcast? Do I not do a podcast? Am I allowed to work out yet? Like, I don't know what the fuck is the right thing to do. I feel like I should just be sitting here and staring at the wall. Like, I don't know what's right and what's wrong. I've never been in this situation. I've never had a friend die. The only person in my life that's been close to me that's died is my father. And, he was 80 years old and it's different. It's not the same, right? So leaning on Luke's friends, and we've become friends, has been probably the silver lining or the way that it's helped me kind of get through things. And I don't really know what else to say about it. It was shocking. It's fucking horrible. And I had so many plans. We had so many plans. We were going to, we were launching a website. We were going to start doing t-shirts. The podcast was growing. Like, I don't want to say it was growing exponentially. It wasn't like, but like we had 250,000 views and listens every month. And I'm like, 250,000 people is a lot of fucking people.
Yeah.
I know there's podcasts out there that do like, way, way more, but it felt like a lot of people to me. And we were getting he was getting DMs and I was getting DMs every day from people and how much we were helping them and how funny they thought the show was and how it just, and we had so many plans for what it was going to be. And it's upsetting that, it's gone. It's upsetting. There's fucking days where I wake up and I don't believe it. It's still like, it's still in that phase too, where I'm like, anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but it's not, the overall summation is it's really sucked. It's been great having fans message with support, and it's been amazing having his friends to lean on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just shows how much Luke was loved. Like when, a Bodybuilding Bollocks podcast popped up on my phone, like, because I've got YouTube Premium, so I just literally just listen to you guys, lock the screen and just listen. And it was always like something I'd always go to. And it was my number one thing that I listened to out of everything. I listen to a lot of different bodybuilding and sports podcasts and things like that, because I work from home essentially. And it was always the one that popped up. I'm like, yes. And I would comment on there, like, and you, before you even would have known who I was or anything like that, I'd comment and you'd always, either like the comment or, comment back or something like that, which is sort of shows like your character and, how you get back to people and how you didn't used to be. But yeah, Luke was just a really nice guy. And I just want to like share something with you as well that he did for me, because after we actually recorded our interview, he actually spoke a little bit about like anxieties and sort of mental health things. And he sort of touched on a few little things, and he even did me interview a little bit to a lesser extent. And after that, like I sort of got off the Skype call to him, and I was sitting there and I was like thinking about it. I was thinking, man, that sounds a lot like certain things that I've sort of battled with in terms of anxieties and stuff like that. Obviously, not knowing it was to the level that he was at with that. And I reached out to him and said, man, that really spoke to me. I said, thanks for talking about that and, whatnot. And, we had a massive conversation for probably, an hour just texting back and forth. And he was giving me advice and saying what has helped him and things like that. And I'm like, he doesn't have to do that. Like he was like writing big, long messages and trying to help me out. I was just like, oh, I'm like, man, thank you so much. And it shows what sort of person he was. And he was helping people, right to the end. And I think that shows the type of man he was. He was... he came across as the funny guy and, the sort of the larrikin and stuff on your show, but really he was a kind-hearted person that just wanted to help people. And I think that's an awesome legacy that he's got. And the amount of messages, man, that I just got, and I was just a guy that just interviewed him a month before and just had a few conversations. The amount of messages I got, people saying like, man, that's heartbreaking. Like, I watched your interview and I cried and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, man, he meant a lot to a lot of people. And I hope, wherever Luke is now or whatever you believe in, I hope that at least he can see that and see how much he meant to so many people, because he really was such a good dude. But
I want to before we go on, I just want to say one thing. It's very important to me that people know this, and that's, I was 10 years older than Luke. Like I'm 41 and Luke's 30 or 31. Yeah. And he always said like I was like one of his influences coming up, and he was a fan of mine, and then he would say I was shit because he likes to make fun of me, and that was cool and we laughed. But he did mean it, and he told it to me often, and I heard him say it in interviews and things like that. And the most fucked up thing happened. I did this podcast with this guy for a year, right? And over the course of the year, I felt like I learned more from him than he did from me, even though I was like his older brother. It was like, I would always tell him, what the right things were to do. Like, you can't get a girl like that, or you can't, you should buy this or spend the money like that, or get this contract or that contract. And the whole fucking time he was teaching me, because the reason I thought of that is because of what you said. We never had conversations about him getting back to people and having these conversations with them and everything. But I got so many DMs from people, screenshots of conversations he had with them that were like at length about, Luke talked to me for an hour one night because I said I was having a bad night. And I would get these things, and it was like I was learning from him the whole time how to actually be a better person. It's incredible to me. Like, he just had it all figured out except for his own shit.
Yeah.
But he had it all figured out as far as like the upper layer of how to live life. He had it all figured out. It's just whatever was deeper was haunting him, I guess. So,
yeah. And for me, like, it was very confusing because he had so many plans and so many things out there that he wanted to do, but I feel like there was just that sort of that other side that we didn't see really as much. And in one message he sent to me, he talked about how he had, he said a specific or a slightly different version of ADHD sort of thing, and he did say to me in brackets, he goes, I effing hate it. And then he put a low on the end, like, oh yeah, I hate it, yeah, it's shit or whatever. But the way he just put a low on the end, it was like sort of like softens it and makes it seem like, oh, it's not as bad as you think, So he really played it like to me, it looked like he had things under control to me. When he messaged me, it's like, okay, I have these issues, but I have it under control. But it goes to show that if anyone out there is struggling, like, I said to people in other videos, I said, reach out to anyone, you know what I mean? Because there's people out there that care about you. And when people think that, oh, I'm on my own, really people aren't these days. And there's, while this whole Corona thing's going on, there's, people are, not getting as much social interaction, go online. The one positive of social media is that you can chat to anyone around the world. If you have family that doesn't live in your state or you can't go and see, then you can chat to them online and FaceTime and all that sort of stuff. So definitely encourage people to do that. But, days later after, the tragic passing of Luke, John Meadows, your coach, had a heart attack, which is dramatic. And I saw that go up and I was like, oh man, like, and the first person I thought of was you, which is funny enough. And I didn't know if to message. I was like, I sort of left it a few hours. I thought, I don't want to break the news to you of that. So I thought you'd probably organically find out through social media or through John's partner who put out the post. And, I sent you a message saying, man, I'm sorry again, like for what you're going through. But obviously, thankfully, John is home now. He seems pretty healthy. Do you have any updates on John and how he's doing?
No. Well, I talked to him yesterday briefly. We were texting back and forth and he said, everything's great. And he's just kind of the same thing he put out on social media. He didn't really say too much different. He said he's cleared to work out in a couple weeks. And he's excited about that. I think he wants to go back now, knowing John, but he's obviously not gonna because he's too smart to do that. But that was shit. It was like, I think it was, I don't know, was it 4 days after? I thought it was 2 days after. I don't know, but it was very close. Only a couple. And I'm like, and I found out the same way everybody else did. I saw Mary's post on Facebook or whatever, and I was like, holy shit. So the first thing I did was I actually got a message from because he has coaches that work under him.
Yep.
And I got a message from one of his coaches, and his coach friend said, hey, John's in the hospital. And I said, yeah, I know. And he said, is there anything you can do for us? Like shoot a training video or shoot some kind of video that you can do for John, since he won't be like able to create anything for his YouTube channel. And I was like, yeah, fuck. So I called Jay, and Jay was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then me and Jay did a Q&A for John's channel. So that worked out well. It was nice to be able to do something for him while he was in the hospital. And as far as, what happened, he's not just my coach. Like, me and John have been working together since 2014, and he's a mentor and a very close friend. So it was, I messaged Mary and I said, look, I would be there right now if I could cross the border, because obviously the borders are closed between Canada and the US. So I couldn't just he's only about 3 or 4 hour drive. So I was like, just gonna get my car and fucking go over there. But I can't cross the border. So I'm like, look, I would be there if I could. We did this video for him. I hope that's cool. And he got out of the hospital a couple of days later and messaged me. He was very thankful. And I've been talking to him once a day since, just to see how he's doing. But, fuck, these things happen. Like, this is going to sound really bad, for lack of a better word, but I thought John would be fine. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I was dealing with the Luke thing, and I wanted to do whatever I could for John, but somehow I knew he was going to be okay. Like, he was going to get through this and he was going to be fine. And it didn't, I don't know why it didn't hurt me as much as it should have. I just thought he's going to be okay. He's going to pull through this.
Yeah. And
so, I was still checking in on him and still, posting, doing stuff for him, whatever I could do. But I don't know, maybe I just didn't want to think any more morbid shit after what had already happened. And I was like, John's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. I just kept telling myself that. And, thankfully he's okay. And he sounds like he's back to his normal self. And I'm glad he got through it.
Absolutely. And something that sort of gave me sort of, I suppose, I don't know even know how to explain it, like made me more positive about the situation is when his wife put up a thing saying that, he might have 10% less heart function. And I thought actually my nan, who she had a heart attack, a very severe one, and she actually, I think she lost about 50% of her heart function. She lived for another 15 years till she was in her 80s.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's great news. And actually John came out and said that, that might actually come back as well, that 10% that he's apparently lost. So I'm like, that's great news. And hopefully that now he's on those, blood thinners, because it was clots that sort of, I believe it was clots that caused it. Hopefully he won't have any more issues with that. So that's great news. So there it is. That's part 1 of my 2-part interview with Fouad Abiad, IFBB Pro Bodybuilder and owner of Hostile Supplements and Apparel. Also in part 2, we go into a whole extra range of topics. It's a total of a 1.5 hour interview. So you've got a little bit less than half it in part 1, and we've got a whole lot more coming up in part 2, which I think you guys will really, really enjoy. He goes into the whole business side of things, plus gives his opinions on some bodybuilding topics that are in the news right now and what his future holds as well in terms of competing in bodybuilding and obviously the business side as well. So I think you guys will really enjoy that. So if you do want to see that, make sure you smash the thumbs up and the like button on this video. Also subscribe and hit the notification bell button. That way you'll be notified of every video that goes up for myself, Xavier Wills, and Desktop Bodybuilding. And let me know what you think about everything that Fouad said in this interview as well in the comments, and give me some love if you're excited for part 2 of this 2-part interview. So anyway, guys, if you guys want to save 10% on Hostile Supplements and Apparel, make sure you enter XAV10, XAV10 at checkout, and the website is www.hostile with 2 S's.com. Anyway, that's it for another video. For myself, Xavier Wills, Fouad Abiad, we are out.